folks who can't attend. So the recording is starting, and I am Dr. Heather Herrera. I oversee the Souls Graduate Student Writing Center, and I'm really happy to be offering today's session, Hit the Gas, Stop Stalling, Start Writing. And I'm also really glad anytime I have an opportunity to be in contact with students. My primary role is to serve the university as an administrator, but my heart is still in teaching, and so this is an opportunity for me to continue to flex that muscle. So welcome everybody. I'm going to go through my PowerPoint, and I will also eventually email it out to everybody who signed up tonight. So you will receive the PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do right now is just to get a sense of who's here in case I have some additional pearls of wisdom to offer you based on, your program or what you're interested in. Please tell us who you are. What program are you in? Are you a first year student, first semester student, second year, last semester? You tell me who you are and tell me how the semester's going. And if you feel like sharing what brought you to tonight's workshop, please share that too. And while you're doing that, I am going to set up to share my presentation.
I can start.
Great. Who's there?
So this is Viviana. I am from Mexico City.
Welcome.
I'm an international student. I'm taking a MASI degree, Master's in Social Innovation. I'm in my last semester. And the reason why I'm here is because, English is not my first language, and I would really love to improve my writing skills. So, yeah.
Well, welcome very much. You're from the Kroc School, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so happy to have you in class. The Kroc students have been a joy to service, and you all are doing that kind of work that's changing the world. So wonderful, Viviana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's that?
Hello, I can introduce myself too.
Hi, Paulina.
Yes. So I am pursuing a master in healthcare informatics in San Diego, California. Also, my English is my second language. So anytime of workshop improvement, I am always happy to learn new skills, new tips, advices for the future. And I'm so happy to be here. And my first semester at the USD is going pretty well. I am very excited and receiving a very good feedback in regards to writings. I am very glad about that, and thank you so much for the help.
Thank you so much, Paulina. It's wonderful to know if somebody is a non-native English speaker, because it helps me as well with the presentation. I have to keep that in mind and make sure I don't use too many, sort of like American, slang or things like that. So thank you very much. And I know we have an old friend here, Maria Labreri. Hi, Maria.
Hi, I am I'm a student at the Franciscan School of Theology. I'm on my last semester working on my thesis, and also English is not my first language, but I have been here for so long, I feel like I should, should do better. But but some of the stuff that I'm reading in Spanish too. So it's hard when you try to read something in Spanish and then you have to translate it anyway. But I attended your first seminar last year, I think it was, and it was really good, very impressed. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Thank you, Maria. Thea, welcome.
Hi, my name is Taya.
Taya.
No worries. Everyone pronounces it Thea. So Taya, and I am at the Kroc School as well. I am a first year Master's in Peace and Justice student. I am planning on going to the law school next year to be doing the dual degree. So some things that I really want to improve upon, it's been several years that I've been in school, is academic writing. I struggle a lot with getting started and with knowing what methodologies to use when writing. And the thing that I think takes most of my time when I'm writing is structure. I just don't see it until I'm very far in the process. And I would love to come up with some tools for structuring my writing in a more effective way. I'm working right now on some policy memos and embarking on a really big research project. And I'm quite nervous. So I'm trying to streamline some of those tools for myself.
Okay. Taya, thank you so much for me understand how to pronounce your name, because that's critical. For sharing what it is that you really are looking to get out of this program. And of course, writing is going to be critical going into the next chapter of your academic and professional life. So I hope we can help provide you with that kind of toolkit that you need to take with you forward. You talked about something that's really important, structure, but you also, you have obliquely referenced sort of process. And tonight, a lot of what we're going to talk about is process. And it's unique to the individual. What I am trying to do is provide you with options for how to get started. And I make it options. I'm not suggesting that there's only one way to approach writing. It depends on the individual. Earlier, before everybody joined, Maria and I were talking about her process. And what matters most is that you find the practice that works for you. And in a way, it almost becomes ritualistic. Once you find what works for you, does it mean working at home or working in a library or working in a cafe? It's different for everybody, but also how you approach the writing is different for everybody. What matters is that you're listening to yourself and you're finding out what works for you. And so I'm going to go over a couple of ways of getting started, so that you're never in a place where you can't at least get started. And the other thing to know is that the more you write, the better you get, not only at the execution of the writing, but at the process. Like you just becomes a rhythm. Okay. And it definitely, just like anything else that you do in your life that is a skill, let's say maybe it's cooking, or maybe it's some other craft that you have in your life. If you really stop and analyze, you'll realize that, oh gosh, there's some pattern or ritual or rhythm to what I do, and I get into a flow. And ideally, one day you will get there. I don't think that you can walk into graduate school and be there, unless you've spent decades of writing. So what we try to do with these workshops is encourage those habits that are going to get you to that place. Don't think that it's going to happen overnight or anything, but what we're trying to do is take off the veil and show you what are the kind of techniques that you can do to get you to the next place. So by the end of this workshop, what I really hope everybody can do is articulate what is the nature of the writing process. And I hope that everyone will be able to have the skills to initiate a writing project. A lot of times the issue is not necessarily that we're bad writers, but we're not so great at getting started. And if we had started sooner, because writing is a process, we wouldn't have to skip steps. And there, as we talked this evening, you'll come to understand that there are some pretty critical steps that if we build in enough time and we attend to the actual writing process, which is iterative, goes forward, goes back, goes forward, goes back. If we build in enough time for that, we can be extremely effective writers. And then the other thing that I really hope everyone leaves the workshop with is an understanding of how do you translate what's up here to the page? How do you take your ideas and create the outline? And I think that really kind of ties into what Thea is saying is the sort of having a structure to your writing. And that is an extremely ambitious part of the writing process. It's accomplishable, but I just want to say that it's not easy, and not everybody goes back to graduate school because it's hard. So just be gentle with yourselves. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here, and then there'll be times where I check in and I ask you, do you have any questions? I think you can raise your hand if you go to the responses. That's probably better because it's a little bit tricky to present and check the chat. So, but I'll try to monitor the chat too, but feel free to unmute and jump in and ask questions so I can clarify. But I want to take a few seconds to ask you to pause and think about something that's really important to your graduate student experience. What is the writing process? So have you, what do you think? And just, if you have a little piece of paper or you open, some kind of word processing software, in your mind, what does the writing process involve? How does the writing process work? How do you approach writing? And if you have nothing else, if you can't really think, if there's some kind of visualization of a process, right? So a process suggests that there is some stages, steps, evolution. What would that image look like? So I'm going to give you about 90 seconds to really reflect. You have about 15 more seconds. All right. So is there anybody who wants to volunteer, when you have this question posed to you, what comes to mind? Do you have something that is a pretty like a formal process, or would you consider what you do informal? Does anyone want to volunteer to share their process or what they think of when asked about writing process?
I'm happy to share.
Thanks.
This is Taya. I don't know if it's informal or formal because I'm not sure what that looks like. But I was thinking about my process and what I've been advised in the past, and it generally, I think starting early is the big key here for me. Is it generally looks like doing a lot of research and allowing myself to go in a lot of different directions while keeping kind of a running list of themes that are emerging from that research. And then stopping and taking a look at those themes and asking myself which ones will get me to kind of the end result that I'm hoping to produce. Like the type of paper is really key here, and that's something I struggle with. But it's this process of kind of like writing, processing what you're writing, going back, crossing things out, moving them around until they formulate a rough outline, and then trying to then make an outline based off of the rough outline and start more formally slotting the pieces of writing I have back into that outline.
Taya, thank you so much. You very much expressed the iterative nature of writing. And as I said, it's individual to most people. But no matter who we're talking about, there is this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which is why building enough time into the project is essential. For it to really be the quality content and execution at the more superficial level of, you know, copy editing, essentially. And so the moving things around is, you know, so I'm so happy and to hear that, because I sometimes there's I have to demystify the process for folks. People think that there's this magical superpower that exists where they can sit down and write something from beginning to end, and it's acceptable. And that's really, truly, unless you have been touched directly by the hand of some superpower, that's usually not the case. It's usually much more involved. And if you look at what researchers say at a kind of a primal level of what the writing process involves, some of what Taya was talking about is the pre-writing, meaning the generating of ideas. That counts for something. And in our really busy lives where we have so much going on, maybe we're working and we have families and we're caregivers and we're going to school, there needs to be the pre-writing phase, which is just the generating of ideas, the synthesizing what you've read. Taya mentioned looking at themes. So if you haven't done the basically, you know, for shorthand homework of looking, you know, doing a second reading of some of your material, looking at your class notes, talking to people, and then there are some techniques that I'm going to go over tonight of brainstorming and free writing, clustering, and so forth. If you haven't done those things, then you're missing out on a big part of the process. So the recommendation from the folks that study composition and rhetoric is that you privilege the pre-writing phase of the writing process. Make sure that you have built in time for doing the reading, the research, and the synthesizing of the information so that you begin to collect the concepts, the ideas, the points that you want to make, or the chapters that you're going to write about, and so forth. And then there's the planning phase. And I'm going to talk about that, some of the techniques for the planning phase tonight, mind mapping and clustering and listing. And then there's the drafting of the writing, the piece of the writing itself, the drafting of it, I think that if you can have the luxury of some reflection where you get some distance from the actual document, a little bit of distance is good. Sometimes there's a phrase used in the writing world about killing our darlings. And what it means is sometimes we're too attached, we're too close to the work, and we're not willing to let some part of it go for the greater good of the whole. Earlier, Maria and I were talking about how as she's doing her research and she's trying to finish her thesis, so many other interesting things are popping up, but what you really need to do is remain faithful to the original. What was your original point? What were those original outlines, those main ideas in the outline, and so forth? Because if you, and maybe something beautiful and important came up, but it just doesn't really gel with this project, you have to be willing to leave it by the roadside. You gotta leave it there. And maybe you will use it for something else, some other thing in the future. You know, and if anybody has ever seen the comments, this seems like a tangent, meaning like this seems unrelated to what is happening in the paper. I mean, that actually comes down to like, I wasn't willing to edit this away. And you need to be able to be brave and make those kinds of choices. So reflection often can enable that. Some kind of feedback is really helpful. The Souls Graduate Student Writing Center is a great resource. Also, if there are people in your program or other people you trust who will give you some honest feedback, that's helpful, because again, sometimes we're just too close to the material to see if there's content or if there are more of the like superficial things like, you know, grammar or APA format or punctuation. You know, sometimes we're just, and we know this from the research on reading, that the mind doesn't actually read what's on the page. It reads what it anticipates on the page if it has seen the page before. So you are the worst person to proofread your own work, because what your mind is going to see is what it anticipates should be there, not what is literally on the page. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there's the revision process, you know, and again, this is the idea of building in sufficient time where you can revise the work. And it may mean that you return to the planning stage. So let's say, for instance, in the revision stage, for, you know, your graduate students, you're not yet achieved national recognition as an expert in your field. So maybe there's some important aspect, dimension to your topic that was omitted or left out. And your advisor says, but, you know, you didn't mention blah, blah. Okay, got to go back to the planning. Where does blah, blah fit into the structure I currently have? And then you go back to drafting and reflection and then getting some feedback. And now you've revised. And it's depending on what you're working on, not usually with maybe a class assignment, but something bigger like your master's thesis or your doctoral dissertation, you might go back to the planning stage. The point that I'm trying to make here is that give yourself over to the process, and the process is iterative. It does move forward, but sometimes before it goes forward again, it goes back. Eventually it comes full circle, but within your circle, you might fold back inwards, and accept that as part of the process. And usually what you get is a much better final product. And then eventually you get to the final stage of editing and proofreading. And this is where the content is comprehensive, it's well organized, you know, a person can read it and see how one idea moves into the next idea, into the next idea, into the next idea. And they can arrive at the same conclusions that you've arrived at because you structured the work in such a way that you made that possible. You put out the breadcrumbs that made it possible for us to see logically, you know, oh, okay, when she synthesized all of these pieces, I get it. I get why the author took this position or this stance or is making this case. At that point, then the editing and the proofreading and all those cosmetic parts of the writing process can happen. And I put those, and everybody puts those at the end, because you don't want to invest your important time and energy in making something, you know, pretty, until you know that that's going to be the, you know, the final version, the final document. So that is the writing process. And the takeaways are basically that it happens in phases, that it's recursive. It might go all the way back before it goes forward. It's iterative. One phase feeds into the next phase, and that it will improve with practice. So this is one of those points in the workshop where I always say, are there any questions? Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, so the invention strategies for getting started. I'm going to talk about 4 types of strategies for getting started. Now, some people have their own technique, strategy. Maybe there's no terminology to explain them diving into the writing assignment. Other times, you know, we need a strategy. Maybe we're having trouble concentrating because there's so much happening in our lives or in the world. And so we're going to just go to a strategy. And I'm going to talk about some of the more common strategies that research has shown are effective with students. So free writing, I'll explain what that is, listing, clustering, and mind mapping. Okay. I actually wrote my master's thesis on free writing. So I'm going to start with free writing because it's actually one of the techniques that I myself use. So this is really just that way of liberating your brain and just putting things on the page. And there actually is a very specific methodology to this. When we hear the phrase free writing, it might sound like, oh, anything goes, but actually there's a methodology. And so I want to lay out the methodology, and if you're not aware of it, then it will help you practice. Again, all of the things that I'm giving you are like, these are ways that you can develop a writing practice. So what free writing really does, and free writing came into the lexicon of composition and rhetoric studies through Peter Elbow. And what it's trying to do is delve into not necessarily so much the subconscious, but it's a way of kind of liberating what it is you want to talk about. And writing in itself is an intellectual endeavor. And often there are so many things happening in our lives that we can't access the thinking. And so what free writing is, this opportunity where you're just letting the things that are interfering with the thinking about your topic, you're getting them out onto the page, before you even start writing about your topic. Right? I don't know if other people experience this, but it's not common that, you're like, I got to write this paper. And the anxiety of having to write the paper, and it kind of takes you down this other road of all the other things and all the other pressures, and life's unfair. And before you know it, like, you're just spiraling into all the things that are complicating your life and so forth. And what free writing does is says, you know what, sister, that's okay. Just put it on the page. Just get it down onto the page. Let it out and let it go. And so when we think about the different steps to free writing, Peter Elbow calls them the rules. It's about setting a timer. So you set a timer in 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes. And I do not advise more than 20 minutes of free writing, because it's an endurance sport, actually. I think 10 minutes is optimal. And often, if anybody practices journaling, they could relate to what I'm saying. Once you kind of release I don't want to call it clutter, because these are important things that are preoccupying you and kind of creating a bit of static that short circuits you having that direct connection to the academic intellectual work that you have to do. But what pre-writing does is says, okay, we're going to look at those things, but we're going to only look at them for 10 minutes. And so you set your timer and you just write everything that comes to your mind without stopping. And just think about like a physical 10-minute exercise, okay? Don't think about the content. What you're putting down is not to be shared. It's not for your assignment. It's not for a small breakout group. It's only a literal, physical, and metaphorical exercise to put down everything that's running through your brain. And you just keep the hands moving. So you are typing, or you're writing on a piece of paper that you just throw away. With the first phase, you're not really concerned about spelling, punctuation, grammar, making sense, because no one's going to ever read this. What matters is that you're moving away the first layer of debris that's getting in the way of you getting to the topic. And so free writing is really a very valuable technique if you feel stuck, like you can't get started. It's really a good technique in those circumstances. And the rule is you just keep the hand moving, even if what you're writing or typing is, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. The mind never stays blank. Something's gonna come in, and whatever it is, you just keep. It's more of muscle memory of just the idea that I am writing. When the timer goes off, no matter what you're writing, you stop. Okay. And then you do the cycle again. So you will do the cycle again, and the second cycle is where I think you can move forward and start at step 7, which is hopefully with those first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever you think you need. You moved that first layer of things that are preoccupying you. And I'm going to be really honest. Sometimes I get a project and I think I'm just really overwhelmed by this project. I don't know where to start, and I'm really afraid I'm going to fail, and I'm not up to this, and I'm a total fraud. these things happen, all these thoughts happen. But maybe in there's some nugget. So maybe you do in your second round of the free writing, maybe in the second round you go, I get it. You know what I should have done is, talked about, and maybe there's, my background and field is teacher education, teacher preparation, and, so I'll think about, like we really need to address the issue of the lack of diversity in the teacher workforce. Why didn't I write about that? Why isn't that something I'm going to approach? And then after your timer goes off, you go back and you read and you go, oh my gosh, here's a really good idea. You circle it, you set the timer again. And now you have, okay, I'm going to just like data dump everything in my brain about preparing teacher preparation and teacher diversity workforce. How do we create a teacher workforce that reflects the diversity of California classrooms? And then you just and bang it out. And again, it's, as you're doing the free writing for those 10 minutes, you are not thinking about spelling, punctuation, grammar, APA format, or anything else. And before you know it, what ends up happening is you can see the body of knowledge that you possess. You can see kernels of some main ideas that could become the outline of a bigger document, essentially. And so that is how free writing works for those occasions where you're like, I don't know where to get started. So the main takeaway is you don't stop writing, you don't edit, you're not listening to any kind of a voice in your head that's judging you or what's ending up on the screen or the page. Whatever comes to mind, you just get it down and you just honor the process. And if you do it maybe 3 cycles, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, that's a half hour. And at that point, you get yourself immersed in the work and the topic and the writing. And so this is one of those strategies that I have used and students I've worked with have used when it's really difficult to approach the topic. So are there any questions about this one? No? Okay. All right. And as I said, I'm going to share the slides. So here are the instructions.
I'm sorry. I just have one question.
Okay.
I'm just curious if you would recommend doing this after or before you've conducted like preliminary literature review or research, or is this kind of useful to help figure out what direction to take your research in as well?
Yes, it is helpful for figuring out what direction. And it can be useful if you're before you've done all of the research and you just don't even know what you want to contemplate, right? Because when you're doing the research, very often you want to have some search terms, and maybe you just need somewhere to deposit what you want to explore. And so just kind of getting that out there could be useful, and just getting you some search terms to do the research. However, if you've done a lot of the research, you can get into a situation where you're like, I have so much information and this can be only a 10-page paper. What am I going to focus on? And so you would use this to sort of get yourself started on what do I consider those main top 2 ideas that have to be articulated, and you put everything out there. So, and again, like, it's a process that you just will begin to build your own toolkit, and free writing is going to be one of those tools in the kit. And you just, as you continue to create your professional, your academic life, you just pull out what you need depending on the circumstances, essentially. But just honor the process, and it won't let you down. It's an investment of 30 minutes. My personal advice is that this one is really good when you just are in a situation where I just can't seem to focus. And I don't have the luxury of weeks and weeks and weeks. I can't delay this project anymore. I need to get started. And so free writing and then clustering, which we'll talk about at the end of the workshop, are my go-to strategies. So, all right, let's look at another strategy: listing. Listing it, I mean, this speaks to some people. It's where you essentially, you just create a list. I know it seems so overwhelmingly simple, right? And how lucky we are that this is an approach, a strategy, right? So you just create a list and you respond to the questions as a way to get you into the work. And the idea is not that you're starting the first draft, but that again, you're like depositing your ideas on the topic and just using this as some strategy to get you moving. And so the questions when you're doing listing is what? So sometimes it just comes down to what is the topic, and just using the strategy of definition. When, that could apply. Maybe context is part of it. So when and where matters. And I can speak from the experience of working with students in the teacher education program who are doing capstone, essentially master's theses, and they have to do research, original research in school settings. And if they can write, make themselves write for 10 minutes about when and where, they have satisfied one part of the requirement, which is addressing context. Who? So if you can do the profile of what is the population you're talking about, or who are your participants in this subject, or how, that depending on what you're dealing with, like again, with the teacher preparation program or in the nursing program, methodology, if you need to write out the methodology, answering a how question can give you all of the material that you need. And then why, would, and could, and should. So why would are part of rationales. And if you're doing a doctoral dissertation or in some of the other practice programs where they have a capstone, and you need to talk about what's the rationale behind this research. Why should we care about this problem, and who is impacted by the findings? So it becomes much simpler when I just ask you why. Write an explanation to why, and so to continue with some of the techniques here, I have an example here, and this one is really set up around more in the social sciences and for the folks who are maybe with the School of Nursing, this example speaks directly to them, but you can substitute some of the terms in my questions. So if you're working with questions to get you into the writing, you start with a question like, what impact does, and the SES stands for social economic status. So what impact does socioeconomic status have on health disparities in urban settings? So if you just create a question for yourself and you begin to just dumping all of the information about that question onto the page, and later you go and you kind of mop it up, then you've gotten yourself started. You've got some material on the page. Same topic, but different question. When does socioeconomic health disparities impact urban settings? So there's that, oh, well, when, is it in childhood? Is it in adolescence? Is it, think about different lifespans, and so forth. Where does socioeconomic status impact health disparities the most? Maybe this is going to get you to think, is it in urban areas? Is it in rural areas? And so on and so forth. Who is most impacted? And now maybe you're going to approach the assignment from the perspective of the folks who are impacted by this situation. Maybe this is about how does it impact? And the research is really going to focus on the relationship between one variable and another variable, where you break down the relationship. The questions are really more or less kind of irrelevant. They're really about generating material. And if you have done, they can be effective in this way, that if you have done a substantial amount of research, you should be able to answer all of the questions. If you can't answer a question, that points you in the direction of, it would be a good idea to look more at, let's say you couldn't really talk about who is most impacted by socioeconomic status. Maybe you need to go back to the literature and read up on the question of who is impacted. Maybe we understand that it's that people who are, children in urban areas, but we don't really know them at a demographic level. So perhaps it turns out that it's children who are from racially diverse backgrounds are more impacted, and they are children who live below the poverty level, and so on and so forth. So, it's, use all of the prompts. And if you get to a prompt and you're like, I don't really know, or I don't have as much to say about that, it could be a sign that you would go back to the literature and explore that a little bit more. This could serve in a number of different ways, but the point is that it's an exercise that gets you writing. And here's a diagram, kind of like I said, that there's the process for free writing. Well, here's a different diagram of, why, would, should, and could. And you'll notice that the questions, if you take the approach of these 4 questions, they can take you in very different directions. So if you have a topic and you kind of want to test it out, I recommend going through these 4 questions as an exercise. So let's say like you've decided to take a position on a particular thing, but then you kind of get yourself like, I'm a little bit stuck. Try why, would, should, and could. Can you answer those questions about your topic? If you can, then you've generated some material to work with to write your assignment. If you can't answer should or could or would, maybe you want to go back to the research, because maybe the being stalled in the writing process is that you don't have enough material from the research to synthesize to write about. Does that make sense? Okay, so the takeaways here are questions are your friends, and use questions to get some deeper insights and to find direction in your writing. And there is no such thing as a bad question when it comes to this pre-writing phase, right? So what I'm talking about this evening in this workshop are the strategies to get you writing. We're not even writing yet. We're just getting ourselves writing. We're just generating material to write about. We're very much in the pre-writing phase. Does anyone have any questions? I don't want to move too quickly or anything. Okay. Oh, I think there is a question. Let me check this out. Okay. Oh, I see it. All right. We talked about that. That was Taya's question. Okay. All right, let's move on then. We clustering mind mapping. So I am more of a visual learner. And I have found that clustering and mind mapping has helped me with the getting started process. And, it's really kind of, it's less narrative and more just word, but what I use it for is I just place these words randomly down on a piece of paper, and then I start just circling things or using colors to sort of organize ideas, right? And I find that these 2 approaches, clustering and mind mapping, are good ways of, when I know I have done an extensive amount of research and I have topics. My problem with getting started is that there's so much there. I'm not seeing the way in. I'm not seeing my outline, essentially. So it will show me about structure and relationship, and it'll also help me develop a hierarchy, because some ideas are sort of a main point and some are they're going to fall into the subheading of that main idea. And so what it looks like essentially in practice is that you have a piece of paper, and I just take a piece of scratch paper and I write down my topic in the middle. So teacher workforce diversity. And then I just spit down on the piece of paper everything that comes to my mind. One word, I just put down the words. And then I start to draw like with just a line between the words as they relate to each other. You could also start to put down any kind of data or facts or examples as well. And you just do this until you feel like, okay, that's everything I know about that topic. And so here's an example, and I think this one is also something that it's more like a public health kind of example. So maybe, it's something about soft drinks. And you just write down everything that you associate with soft drinks. All right. So if you, depending on where you are, if you are in the School of Business and you have to do something about marketing and soft drinks, or it's Han and you're a nursing student, it has to be about the health implications of soft drinks, or even if it's you're in Croc and it's like, what are the entrepreneurial opportunities, the social entrepreneurial opportunities of soft drinks, whatever it is, you could always replace your topic with this, but this goes into the center. And then you just sort of in around that circle, you're just going to put in everything that comes to your mind, everything. So in this situation, it's kind of like, well, there's the bottling of the soft drinks, the ingredients, the manufacturing, the sweeteners, sugar. Oh, there's caffeine, there are health effects. What do I think of when I think of health effects? Well, there's obesity and diabetes, and, what are people drinking? What aren't people drinking when they're drinking soft drinks? Should they be having milk or juice? There's tooth decay, there's nervousness. And so you just put all of the ideas that you can associate with. Then you draw some lines. And what you notice is that there are spokes. Not every single bubble is headed towards soft drinks directly. The third phase of this model is that you relate things back to, and it might be that you didn't even have health effects here, but you thought of soft drinks and you thought about diabetes, and diabetes made you think about obesity, and obesity made you think about, well, what are people not drinking instead of drinking soft drinks? And that made you think about tooth decay, and tooth decay, but made you think about health. And so you start to see relationships. And what can happen with clustering is that you get your outline, right? So my topic is the soft drinks, but my main points are going to be about the health effects of soft drinks, the way that soft drinks are marketed, and how they are manufactured. So if you think about it, I have this spoke to manufacturing, I have this spoke to marketing, and I have this spoke to health effects. And then off of each of those three main spokes, I have a lot of satellite ideas. And some of those ideas relate back to another sub idea. And I can start to see relationships. I can see that there's some relationship between health effects and the manufacturing, because part of the manufacturing involves the formula that involves caffeine, sugar, and artificial sweeteners. And so maybe when I'm organizing the structure, there's a relationship. I'm going to write this paper about, let's say, what are the impacts, or let's just say, what are the impacts of soft drinks on the consumer? And we're gonna create, what's the greatest or what's the least impactful. You would start there, and then you move whatever you choose as your hierarchy. The point is that there's some relationship between these ideas. And so you segue, let's say you had started with the idea of manufacturing. And as you move through manufacturing, you start talking about caffeine, sugar, and artificial sweeteners. And then there's this natural relationship to the health implications of the ingredients that are part of the manufacturing process. And then you can talk about those things. And then maybe what you were really concerned about here is marketing and how these products are marketed to kids and teens, and what does that really mean? And so this is just a way of, it takes not very much time or thought, honestly, to do the clustering model where you're just like, okay, I got to talk about this topic, and boom, 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 boom. These are the things that I know. And then you draw the line. So it's 3 steps. It's, this is my topic, and then random words on the piece of paper of what it is that I know. And third step, the relationship, the lines between those topics. Then the 4th step is for you to make a decision about, well, how do I take this beautiful artwork and create an outline of a paper? Mind maps is another similar idea to clustering. And here, you know, what you do is what you do is everything has equal importance, essentially, because sometimes it's just too much to have to think about the hierarchical or just the differential relationships between ideas. And maybe you just need to start with, I have a topic, right? And let's say this topic relates to, I'm not giving you all the topic, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what could this topic be. If, when I say the word, what comes to people's mind is housing, education, chronic or temporary, chemical dependency, social service eligibility, employability, physical health, mental health. So does anybody, if you could put it in the chat if you want, does anybody have any ideas about what could be here in the center? What is in the center? What's the topic that would inspire these subtopics?
I'm thinking about homeless.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, it could be homeless. In that area, this example was about the homeless is very much, yeah. So if I had said to folks, you know, put homeless in the center of your page, you know, what are the subtopics that spin out of that? And then, okay, so I know these are the ideas, concepts that come up. These are the associations one can make. And how much can I write about the different ones? And maybe it comes down to this thing around chronic or temporary. Oh, I don't have many facts or figures or ideas to explore. I'm going to go back to the research on that one. Or, you know, depending on what the assignment is, you know, you have several options, but it could be like, oh, you know, what's really at play with the homeless situation is the mental health issues. And I know so much about that. And that's the one that I'm going to write about. That's my topic I feel passionate about. Or chemical dependency. I mean, it's up to the individual. The whole point here is there are a variety of strategies to spark the inspiration to get you moving into the topic so that you don't stay stuck. This is a mind map of food deserts. So perhaps you've been given you're in some kind of a program that's addressing issues of inequity, and the topic is food deserts. You know, I'm going to give everybody the slides here, but you could take this slide, put your own topic in there and go, okay, what's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about my topic? And you put it in there. Food deserts. Okay, the first thing that comes to my mind are low-income neighborhoods. Okay, and then what are the things that I'm associating with in the low-income neighborhoods? You put those things down there. Number two, what comes to mind when you think about food deserts? And so food deserts are those places in urban areas mostly, which it's difficult to buy affordable, good quality, fresh food. And there's, so many negative implications for this. So people, the only kind of food available in these food deserts would be food that can be bought at convenience stores or fast food places. And it turns out that they then experience a greater frequency of health issues, particularly obesity, heart disease, diabetes, as well as asthma and emergency room visits. So you would put down one of those things here. Let's say what comes to my mind when I think about this is, poor health. That's my number two. And then I put down what I know about poor health here, right? And then, so again, like you could just literally, I'm going to send you these slides. You can use this, put your topic in there and think about what's the first thing I know, the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing, and then what are the things about that subtopic that I know, and plug those in. And look, you get yourself an outline. So my takeaways for the clustering and mind mapping is that, it's really friendly for visual learners. It's really friendly when you're short on time. I use this in my office all the time because I'm constantly having to write reports, or, I have some other major project and I just am torn in a million directions. And if I just take a blank piece of paper and I just put down, okay, what are the four things, and what are the 4 or 3 subtopics of those 4 things and their relationships, and it can jumpstart me. Now that outline can get me writing, but there's a 50-50 chance that the final project is totally faithful to that outline. What's important is that I've started the writing, and that's what our workshop is really about. So I don't want to keep people way too long or anything. I do want to take any questions that you have, about the writing process or writing in general, or anything that the Writing Center can help you with. Feel free to jump in and ask questions. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to stop the recording so we can just talk freely.